The first thing Lena did after the band struck its opening note was aim me like an accessory at a man in a navy suit. Her hand cool clamped my forearm. "Mr. Caldwell," she chirped, brightness polished to a mirror. "I'd love for you to meet my new mother-in-law. This is Evelyn. She's between positions." The pause was surgical. I watched it land in his eyes before she finished lighter, as if confiding a harmless secret. "It's been a while for her. Out of the market, you know how it is." The rooftop greenhouse had been dressed for the reception, fern walls hanging orchid strings of lights. I stood in the prettiest dress I owned, pearls my late husband had clasped around my neck, and smiled as if it were ordinary. Caldwell's handshake was practiced firm, economical. "Pleasure," he said. "Evelyn Hart," I offered. "It's lovely to meet you." "Northbridge and Company, right? B2B accounts, healthcare, and logistics." His eyes refocused despite themselves. "We like to say we're category agnostic," he said, "but yes." Lena's grip tightened. She had done what she came to do. Now she wanted me to fade to background decor. "Mr. Caldwell is my managing director," she added. "We're slammed, but I told him I'd make time to connect tonight." I tilted my head. "How are you finding the market this quarter noisier than last year? Everyone thinks a viral post is a strategy." That coaxed a brief, real laugh. "Noise is the word. Procurement wants miracles at a discount. The big players keep scooping the marquee work." "Mariner Collective," I asked. "They've been taking share for years. Interesting leadership, private disciplined." I felt rather than saw Lena's quick glance. She had never asked what I did with my weekdays. She preferred me in nouns that fit on a place card: mother, widow, hostess. The band slid into a waltz and Aaron appeared, my son, handsome in a tux, offering Lena the first dance. I retreated to our table and lifted a champagne that had surrendered its bubbles. Around me, the greenhouse hummed clink glassware, 100 small negotiations over tulips. Lena glowed. Aaron could not stop looking at her. I wanted deeply for it to be simple. "She was in my classroom, you know," said the woman beside me, small and neatly arranged, an antique cameo at her throat. "Lena, Mrs. Patel, first grade." "You must have stories," I said. "Once she noticed a boy had no crayons," Mrs. Patel said. "She broke hers in half and passed them out like bread." She smiled and sighed. "Children learn new words as they grow, and sometimes they use them to talk themselves away from who they were. Or toward what they're afraid to be," I said. The waltz ended. Lena scanned the room as if it were inventory. Who mattered, who didn't? She lifted Aaron's hand for a kiss, then angled toward the Whitakers, whose name floated through every arts gala in the city. She was methodical, and I couldn't deny good at this. I excused myself ostensibly to find a powder room and followed a corridor of potted figs toward the terrace. Night had deepened into a velvet that collected at the edges of the glass. The river was a dark ribbon. The city glittered beyond the balustrade. I stepped into the cooler air and let my shoulders drop. Voices carried from the shadowed end. Lena's aimed downward into her phone. "Mom," it landed. "He sees I'm not from the small crowd," she said. I introduced her, did the whole between roles bit. He laughed. A pause, a laugh of her own. "Please." She wore pearls. I stood very still. Somewhere inside a tray of forks slid. Someone exclaimed, delighted. Lena's voice softened. "Hush, babe, you up." It was perfect. He met her, and I know. Of course Aaron didn't. "Don't be silly. We'll talk when I'm out." The call clicked off. Another started. Variations on the same theme, a little bolder each time. Eavesdropping does not change what is true, only how quickly it arrives. I felt the old instinct to step back to sand the edge off a moment for the sake of the room. But there was no room here that belonged to me except the small one behind my ribs. I let the quiet finish its work, then turned toward the corridor. By the time I returned, the cake had been sliced into manageable promises. Centerpieces leaned toward their candles. Aunt Marjorie told a story she had told at every wedding since 1989. Uncle Leon pretended to hear it for the first time. I found Aaron at the end of the bar, bow tie, loosened happiness humming through him like current. "There you are," he said, the corners of his mouth tilting toward childhood. "Lena's been looking for you. She wants to introduce you to a couple of clients." "How thoughtful," I said, accepting the glass of Sauvignon Blanc he pressed into my hand. "You okay?" He read faces for a living. He always could, so he had learned to read mine. "You seemed elsewhere." "It's been a long day," I said. "A beautiful one." I touched his cheekbone with my knuckle where a laughing flush still lived. He had his father's eyes. "I'm glad you like her," he said. "It means a lot, to both of us." He glanced toward the dance floor where Lena listened to someone with the intensity she reserved for people above a certain income bracket. "She's going to do big things." "I never doubted that," I said. The band shifted to something fast. A line of cousins performed a dance they'd rehearsed in someone's basement. For a moment, the greenhouse became pure celebration. When the song ended, Aaron was tugged away for photographs. I smoothed the skirt that had wrinkled under the weight of the evening and collected my wrap. On my way to the coat room, I passed Mr. Caldwell again. He was ringed by 3 men whose ties were shades of authority. He saw me, gave a nod that was almost respectful, and returned to his orbit. In the mirror above the hydrangeas, a woman looked back who knew how to host a dinner, to hold a line, to write a thank you note that made people feel seen. I set the wrap over my shoulders and rejoined the room. Lena materialized at my elbow. "There you are," she said brightly. "Mr. Caldwell said you two had an interesting chat. I told him you were lovely," he agrees. "I'm sure you made a compelling case," I said. She studied me for a heartbeat smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We should say hello to the Whitakers together," she said, "a united front, optics matter." "Of course," I said, and let her steer me across the floor where the lights trembled in the glass and the city pressed its face to the panes to watch. Lena guided me toward the Whitakers as if maneuvering a chess piece she'd decided was better placed on a different square. The greenhouse floor flexed underfoot steel and glass over river water, and every step carried us through reflections of our own faces doubled and thinned by panes. Margaret Whitaker's diamonds made their own weather. Robert's tuxedo looked like it had been pressed on him in a stronger gravity. "Mrs. Whitaker," Lena sang, "you remember Aaron's mother, Evelyn." Margaret's smile was the sort used to inaugurate atriums. "Of course. What a luminous evening." "Your foundation's new residency program is impressive," I said. "Pairing sculptors with industrial partners will keep more than galleries alive." Robert brightened. Someone read the brief. "I read for pleasure," I said, and let the line stop there. Lena squeezed my arm once and impressed, "You can pocket," and moved the conversation toward the couple she really wanted across the circle. I stood, smiled, translated small talk into temperature and wind. When the band slid from standards to something wedding DJ cheerful, Aaron reclaimed her, and I excused myself with a nod. Margaret's hand brushed mine as I turned. "He looks like you around the eyes," she said, and I let the compliment tuck itself into a quiet corner I still kept for softness. The night thinned out, as a good party should. The florist's arches became frames for leave-taking. On the way out, I passed Mr. Caldwell again. He was holding a low conference at the edge of the service station, sleeves rolled 2 precise folds. Our eyes crossed. He gave me that half-bow men offer to women whose names they plan to remember if they find a use. I felt invisible and visible at once. It's an old trick staying both. I found my coat, thanked 3 people I'd only met tonight as if we'd always known each other, and slipped into the elevator. Alone, I checked my phone. 2 messages from Aaron Logistics, gratitude studded with exclamation points. A photo, our little cluster in front of orchids. Lena angled slightly forward so she wasn't quite blocking me, but also wasn't quite not. I imagined showing it to my husband if he were alive, and for a suspended second I felt the clean physical ache of wanting to hand someone a picture. The ride down hummed. The doors opened. River air moved warmer against my face than I expected. A valet jogged. A car materialized. I was delivered home to a brownstone that had learned over the years how to be both shelter and ledger, the place I slept and the place that stored the accumulated arithmetic of my days. I took off the pearls first, then shoes, then the dress, stepping out of the fabric with the care you reserve for something that lent you its best self for one night. In the bathroom, I pressed cold water over my wrists and thought of Lena's voice cutting into the terrace dark like a blade that enjoyed being a blade. I wasn't angry. Anger is a hot instrument. I needed something cooler. I dried my hands, brushed my hair, and walked barefoot to my office. The room had belonged once to a version of me that thought a large desk would make the work smaller. The desk was still large, an old walnut boat. I sat and flipped open the calendar, the handset. The habits I'd kept because they kept me. In the window, the river made a remark about time. I dialed. "Nora," I said when she answered, "I hope you slept." There was a smile in her voice. There always was. Define slept. "We need a quiet review," I said. "Northbridge and Combe, the public face, but also the seams. I want any vendor disputes, staff turnover, client retention, especially on their healthcare and logistics accounts." "When?" "Yesterday," I said, "because language has its rituals." "Copy. Reason code," she asked. "Perspective alignment," I said, and we left it there. Nora understood the categories I didn't say aloud. Keep the circle tight. NDA, everyone who breathes. And Nora, keep my name off any email that isn't inside the house. "It's a large house," she said mildly. "Then keep it to the attic." We rang off. I sat for a minute and listened to the apartment taking inventory of its own night sounds upstairs, neighbor's dishwasher. A late siren unscrolling 3 blocks over the radiator, clearing its throat, though the season hadn't asked it to yet. I wrote exactly 2 lines on a legal pad and left the pen angled like a sundial. By morning, a draft report lived in my inbox with Nora's signature terse columned skeptical. I read while the kettle hissed toward boil. Northbridge's numbers were what I expected: outwardly trim, inwardly hungry. They'd grown by poaching middle-market clients after the biggest firms priced themselves into abstraction. Their staff retention rate had dipped, then corrected in a way that meant money had been thrown at the problem without asking the problem any questions. Procurement notes said aggressively competitive, which usually meant dangerous enough to enjoy cutting corners, not careful enough to hide it elegantly. I paged to the personnel appendix. Lena's file was thin where it should have been thick. The bullets were serviceable, solid client stewardship, on-time deliverables. Good at smoothing nerves, but light on outcomes that wore numbers proudly. Her public-facing channels did the heavy lifting: posts about leading strategic initiatives, captions that turned steak dinners into stakeholder sessions, a selfie outside a hotel with the skyline cropped just so tagged #client weekend when the city behind her was Miami, and the client she claimed to be visiting was a Boston biotech that hadn't expanded south. I poured tea and went to the window. The street wore last night's confetti in a sheepish line along the curb. What I felt wasn't satisfaction. It was recognition. People who confuse performance for proof always leave crumbs. The trick is to follow them without appearing to have bent. I called Nora back. "We'll need corroboration if this goes to conversation," I said. "Not gossip. Artifacts. Receipts, calendars, travel logs. Copies, not screenshots. Screenshots can be doctored," she said. Anticipating me the way well-trained gravity anticipates something dropped. "And vendor call notes," I said. "I want to know how Northbridge behaves when the room thinks no one is taking notes. We have 3 vendors on the health side who like us. They'll talk if we phrase the ask as compatibility scoping." "Do that." I hesitated. "I'll need a meeting with their senior team this week. Frame it as exploratory, keep my schedule unnamed. If Ms. Rowan is assigned to healthcare, include her." "She is," Nora said. Paper rustled, the elegant kind of rustle that meant she'd already checked. "You want the full account team or just leadership?" "Both," I said. "If we're going to be impressed, let's be impressed systematically." Nora's breath made a smile sound. "You dress for battle, I'll build the room." I laughed. "No battle. Just a conversation between adults who balance things." "Adults who bring binders," she said, and hung up before I could dignify that with a demurral. Mid-morning thickened into afternoon. I ate a hard-boiled egg with salt and the kind of hunger that isn't about food. The day acquired edges. Nora's second packet arrived, expense submissions cross-checked with reservation systems. Travel declared as conference correlated with event rosters that did not list Lena's name. A lift receipt flagged for a drop-off address that was a private condo with no client office within 6 blocks. Nothing screamed, the pile just spoke patiently, repeating itself until you had to admit you'd heard. I wrote to myself as if I were someone else. It's a trick that kept me honest when stakes were high. Split the roles. One of me listed facts, one asked, "Oh, what do you?" The second list was shorter patterns, not punishments. In the margin, I wrote Aaron's name once, then cross-hatched over it until the graphite became a small square the paper couldn't swallow. There are kinds of love that want to hold and kinds that steady. It's not that I loved my son more in one mode than the other. It's that the second asked me to stand a little farther away so the shape would stay visible. By late day, Nora texted, "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. 2 p.m., Northbridge HQ. Caldwell plus 2 VPs plus Rowan. Conference room 9. A calendar square appeared as if conjured. She added, "We kept the pre-read to a 2-sentence overview. They think you're considering a southeastern expansion and want to test their capacity." I replied, "Good. Keep the materials in-house. Bring the red binder." "Already packed," she sent. Blue tabs for personnel, gray for procurement, white for client outcomes. Vendor notes on rice paper because I'm dramatic. I smiled into the phone and let that be my concession to theatrics. Evening arrived like a hand on a dimmer. I cooked 3 things and ate 2. Aaron texted a photo from the hotel suite they'd kept for an extra night, Lena in robe and slippers, her hair pinned into knife-edge waves, even now, toes peeking out like punctuation. "We're floating," he wrote. I wrote back a heart and deleted it, then typed, "Rest, drink water. Call me when you wake up tomorrow." He sent 3 hearts a cascade that would have embarrassed him at 14. It warmed me more than the soup. I slept without dreams big enough to recall. Morning was clean. I ironed a blouse I liked for its collar, sharp, simple pressed trousers, set shoes beside the door, then changed my mind and chose flats. A woman can be tall by standing. Nora arrived at 9 with coffee and a binder that looked like it could keep a secret. She set both down and surveyed me the way a good tailor does not for beauty for fit. "You'll do," she said. "Talking points are tabs 2 and 4. Don't use the phrase best in class unless you want to watch 3 men die a little." "I never want men to die even a little," I said. "Then promise me you'll avoid disruption unless you mean a scaffolding collapse." We went once through the document names, dates, 2 clean charts that told the story without begging for attention. We did not rehearse anything that would sound like a line. By 10, the binder had disappeared into my satchel, and Nora had moved on to other fires that did not want to be called fires. I left early enough to arrive early without announcing it. I have never liked being on time. It feels like consent to someone else's clock. Northbridge's headquarters sat in a glass tower that enjoyed seeing itself reflected in the tower across the street. The lobby was a place where money liked to perform crispness stone floors, curated plants, a scent like restrained citrus. The young man at the desk had the glow of a person whose skin still believed in mornings. "May I help you?" "Evelyn Hart," I said, "here for Mr. Caldwell." He repeated my name into a headset, as though sending it to space, then smiled. "Welcome, he'll be right down. Can I get you anything?" "Water would be kind." He brought it, then pretended not to notice that I took one sip and set the glass on the table without leaving fingerprints. From the waiting area, I could see the bullpen past a corridor of transparent rooms, screens through graphs against faces. A woman in a gold sweater performed a pitch to 3 men whose chairs had been designed by a person who loved cables. Near the back, a figure in a red blazer, the kind you dry clean as punctuation, bent over a laptop, hair clawed into a perfect crescent. Lena did not look up. Even at this distance, her concentration had the choreography of someone being observed by someone who mattered. I let my gaze rest on the upper right corner of a whiteboard 2 rooms over, as if this were the thing I'd come to learn. The elevator pinged. Mr. Caldwell arrived with 2 others. A woman with a notebook and a tempered way of seeing, and a man who looked relieved to be wearing a tie, that quiet. Caldwell's hand found mine. "Ms. Hart," he said, and the Ms. pleased me inordinately. "Thank you for coming. We're excited to talk." "Likewise," I said. He turned to gesture toward the conference rooms, and only then noticed where my eyes had been. "Shall we bring Rowan? She handles our health vertical." "If she has time," I said, as if the matter were wholly optional. He waved to the red blazer. Lena looked up. The expression that crossed her face moved too fast to categorize surprise, confusion, a quick calibration, the smile arriving on cue. "Evelyn," she said, coming forward with the energy of a person who refuses to flinch. "What a coincidence. The city is a village," I said mildly. Caldwell did the introductions twice the public way, and the way that signals hierarchy. Lena took her seat just to the left of his right, which was correct for someone who wanted to be seen, but not blamed. I set my satchel down next to a chair that faced the door. The room was all clean rectangles, table wall screen, a pitcher of water with lemon wheels floating like punctuation. Someone had written synergy on the whiteboard and then, perhaps embarrassed, erased it with extra vigor so the word was still there, ghosted. "Before we begin," Caldwell said, "let me say how thrilled we were to hear from your office." He folded himself into a seat, leaned forward, practiced openness. "We've long admired Meridian," he caught himself. "Your organization's work." The slip landed without sound. I had not given him the name. Nora had given him only the necessity of meeting, which meant Caldwell or one of his VPs had done what anyone hungry does, guessed, triangulated, asked the building. The woman with the notebook didn't look surprised. The man with the quiet tie did. Lena looked at me as if I had stepped through a painting. "Shall we talk about capacity first," I said, "or philosophy?" "Capacity," said the quiet tie, relief making him brave. "We can get to philosophy after we prove we can lift." "Then let's begin with what you're lifting," I said, flipping open the binder to a blank pad. I wrote the date in the corner, the way you mark a beginning you intend to remember for its particulars. Lena's pen clicked once. The sound skittered across the table and dissolved. I raised my eyes and waited for the first number. Outside the glass, this office performed its weekday phones, keystrokes, a low tide of voices moving toward and away from deadlines. Inside, the air gathered itself into a smaller room. Inside the room, the kind made not by walls but by attention. I found my breath, placed my hands lightly on paper, and listened. Caldwell started with numbers because numbers look like proof when arranged in columns. "Health vertical 23 full-time, 6 contractors," he said. "Average account load per pod is 4. We track cycle time, NPS retention, CAC to LTV. Our churn is below 6%. The man with the quiet tie. Harper slid a 1-page with bars that wanted to be mountains. The woman with the notebook, Cho, added, "We run quarterly postmortems. Procurement sits in to keep us honest." Lena spoke last. "I lead 2 key books," she said, steady. "I've stabilized a legacy client and taken a challenger from pilot to national in under 9 months." I let the sheet sit under my hands as if warming it would change what it said. "And the staffing ratio when a client spikes," I asked. "If a hospital network rolls out telehealth faster than expected and asks for regional segmentation in 2 weeks, how do you keep the pod from burning?" Caldwell brightened. This was familiar air. "We have a surge bench," he said. "Pre-vetted talent. We also maintain vendor relationships with data and creative shops who can scale on short notice." "Payment terms," I asked. "Net 60, Harper said, and then cautious net 90 when legal wrestles." Cho's pen paused. We prefer 30, she added, as if placing a flower on a grave. And retention. You mentioned churn below 6%. I looked up. Staff retention, not clients. 81% rolling 12, Cho said. We've invested in manager training and comp calibration. 81, I repeated. What was it 9 months ago? 68, Harper said, and then regretted being exact. That's a lot of river between the banks, I said mildly. What changed? Comp calibration, Caldwell said again softer. And clear paths for promotion. Lena leaned in. We run impact reviews, she said. It keeps the high performers engaged and surfaces misalignments. Ah, I said, misalignments. Outside the glass, a phone trilled, cut trilled again. Inside, the room held its shape. I drew a small square in the margin where the date lived. Walk me through a recent win, I said. Healthcare multi-state footprint regulatory constraints. Harper fielded it to his relief. He spoke crisp nouns. Cho added verbs. Caldwell landed the adjectives. Lena braided in adjectives of her own and aimed them at herself. The story sat upright until I asked 2 small questions about patient privacy and campaign segmentation and whether their vendor had actually signed a BAA before the pilot. Cho's pen resumed, but her eyes were on me now, not her notes. I ask because what people do when the room is in a hurry is what they do, I said. Hurry distills culture. Caldwell nodded as if he'd thought of that first. We don't cut, he said. We sprint within the rails. Good. I turned a page. Let's talk outcomes, not slide wins dollars. You mentioned KT to LTV for your hospital client. What was the lift after 6 months? Harper gave me a number that knew it was round. I looked at it until the edges tried to become corners. He amended it down by 1.5 points. I offered a smile to let him stop correcting. Capacity maps to philosophy, I said. If we see ourselves in business with you, the two will need to touch. May I ask, Caldwell said, leaning forward as if reaching politely into a fridge. How you see yourselves, Meridian, he corrected himself again. Your organization has a reputation for rigor. Rigor is just remembering to ask the same questions on the good days that you ask on the bad, I said, and not treating luck as a skill. I felt the room exhale. It's disarming making the big things sound like a kitchen thing. Then I set my pen down. Let's leave capacity for a moment, I said. Philosophy, then. Caldwell's smile trimmed itself. Your industry markets without a scalpel, I said. There's blood sometimes, even when no one meant it. We prefer partners who like to count the stitches. Of course, Cho said quickly. Governance is built in. It's always built in, I said. Enforcement is elective. I opened the folder that Nora's hands had made neat. I did not push it across the table like a weapon. I lifted the first page as if we were admiring a map. For instance, I said the way client dinners can end up being one's own birthday. This is a reservation under Ms. Rowan's account for March 15th. 8 guests. The client in question posted a photo from a different city that night. Lena didn't speak. Her hands were calm on the table. Only the tendons changed color. Here I continued turning a page. June, Miami. Billed as conference travel. The conference sponsor's attendee list does not include Ms. Rowan. Her public post that weekend includes a pool, a straw hat, and the caption finally off-grid, which is a charming way to describe professional development. Harper studied a lemon slice in the water pitcher as if it held parole. And this, I said, sliding a thin printout toward Caldwell, is a rideshare receipt at 12:43 a.m. from a midtown restaurant to a residential address. There is no client office within 6 blocks of that drop-off. Perhaps there was an off-site breakfast. Lena stared at me in a way that looked like listening. Caldwell cleared his throat. Ms. Hart. I prefer Evelyn, I said, not because the name mattered, but because ordinary words lower the temperature. These artifacts don't require theater. They require context. If there's a reasonable explanation, I'd like to hear it. Lena found her voice. This is out of bounds, she said, not loud. Dangerously even. How did you obtain internal materials? Expense reports aren't public. Receipts live in many places, I said. Reservation systems, public posts, vendor ledgers. People volunteer more data about themselves than they realize, especially when they are trying to be seen. We do not trespass, we corroborate. Caldwell tried another door. If the concern is an individual's judgment, the concern is alignment, I said. There's a difference. Cho's pen clicked softly. She'd written one word on the top of her page and boxed it in. I suspected it was ours. Caldwell looked at the rideshare printout as if hoping the ink might decide it had somewhere else to be. We take ethics seriously, he said, because there are sentences that live in drawers in rooms like this and climb out when you call them. So do we, I said, which is why I asked for capacity first. Skill without standards is expensive in peculiar ways. I closed the folder. Forgive the detour. It's inelegant to discuss a person's choices across a conference table. Lena's chin lifted the small distance you move when you hope your face will look like an argument someone else should lose. You came here to embarrass me, she said. I came here to understand whether the way you treat your ledger reflects the way you will treat ours, I said. I came here because a man on my payroll sent me a list of firms that had done good work for organizations like mine, and Northbridge was on it. Harper looked at Caldwell. Caldwell looked at me. Organizations like yours, he said slowly. We haven't discussed who you represent. You corrected yourself twice, I said, not unkindly. Meridian. Silence rearranged itself. The words stayed between us like a piece of furniture the room had not noticed until it stubbed a toe. Caldwell's mouth opened, closed, opened again. We've pursued Meridian for 18 months, I said. You've done fine work for people we respect. Your southeastern pitch last spring was smart. Cho blinked as if her eyes had been rinsed. Harper set both hands on the table, surrender or attention. Sometimes they look like the same thing. Lena said nothing at all. I am the chief executive of Meridian Holdings. I said the way you might say your street address to a cab driver who has asked you twice to repeat it. I'm here without fanfare because fanfare doesn't build anything that stands. If we're to talk, we talk about the parts that hold the weight. Caldwell's smile didn't so much fade as put on a different suit. Understood, he said. We mercy, we are honored. His gaze flicked to Lena and back, a calculation made of 3 numbers he didn't like. If there have been errors in judgment by any team member, we will correct and we will... I didn't bring you evidence to give you a speech, I said. I brought examples to see whether you hear them. If this is the first time you're seeing these, ask yourself why. If it's not, ask yourself what you decided not to see. Cho's pen stopped clicking. Harper shifted once, then stayed still. Lena looked at a point over my shoulder as if there were something written there that only she could decipher. Let's return to work, I said, letting the folder rest beneath my fingertips like a sleeping animal. You say you can lift. Show me where the rails are. Caldwell seized the lifeline if that's what it was. He described intake to launch in tight, unadorned steps. Cho added the places where the process bent to reality, how procurement and creative shared a calendar, who had veto when risk sniffed the room. Harper pulled up a secure dashboard that reported live performance across 3 verticals. He did not try to hide the dips. Lena contributed where she owned detail and where she did not. She passed the question to Cho without bristling. It was in its way impressive. When they had finished, I took a breath I hadn't noticed I'd been measuring. Thank you, I said. One last item. Caldwell arranged his face around neutral. Our southeastern expansion, should it proceed, represents $12 million over 3 years, I said. I placed the fact on the table without garnish. That number is made of hospitals, clinics, and a supply chain that cannot tolerate sloppiness. Our partners are chosen for their capacity and for their discipline. We don't outsource our standards. The lemon in the pitcher rotated once against the glass. Outside, a laugh rose and fell, someone's victory or joke. I'll leave these copies, I said, tapping the thinner packet I had brought for them, not the folder. It's an index, not a dossier. No conclusions, just flags. What you do with your staff is an internal matter. I stood. The chair made a sound I liked, a low cloth whisper, nothing dramatic. Caldwell and Harper rose with me because their bodies remembered old etiquette. Cho lifted her notebook and kept her seat. She had nothing to prove. Lena stayed still for half a second longer than was safe, then was on her feet too. Ms. Hart, Caldwell said, offering his hand. The second syllable caught. He corrected. Evelyn, thank you for your candor. Thank you for your time, I said. It's the only thing any of us actually have to spend. Lena stepped forward, chin leveled. Evelyn, she said, I would appreciate the chance to respond to those flags. I appreciate that you would, I said. I've heard enough for now. We shook hands, Caldwell firm, Harper slightly damp, Cho a nod that meant she'd filed the morning where it belonged. Lena's hand was cool and very steady. In the hall, the receptionist straightened as we passed. The bullpen looked exactly as it had an hour earlier, everyone making small weather systems at their desks. The elevator admitted me without fuss. In the mirrored panel, I watched 4 versions of myself, one for each wall stand, shoulder to shoulder, and looked like a single woman trying not to think about anything she didn't have to think about yet. On the ground floor, the lobby's citrus cooled. Outside, streetlight gathered on the hoods of cars. I stepped into afternoon that smelled faintly of rain and transit, and began to walk, binder under my arm, the city's glass, shifting the sky into rectangles I could carry without spilling. The city folded itself into evening while I walked. By the time I reached my block, the air had the soft heat of late summer pressed thin by a coming storm. In the brownstone, I set the binder on the entry table, turned on one lamp, then another, and let the quiet finish what the meeting had started. The phone lit with Aaron's name before I'd taken off my shoes. Mom, he said the word tight. Lena came home early. She says you blindsided her in front of her boss. She's saying you went after her job. I met with her employer, I said. We discussed whether our organizations fit. Your organizations, he repeated. And then smaller. What does that mean? I sat at the kitchen table and traced a droplet the water glass left on the wood. It means I run Meridian, I said. the company you know as Meridian Holdings. Silence traveled the line, and I could hear his breath find a new place to stand. You're the CEO. Yes. You never told me. You didn't ask, I said not unkindly, and I wanted you to build your life because it was yours, not because of mine. I heard him sit down on his end, a small thud, a shift. Lena says you called her a liar? I said the documents contradicted her captions, I said. I said receipts should match the stories they pay for. She says the expense reports were approved. They may have been, I said. Approvals don't rewrite facts. They only tell you who else wasn't looking. His breath snagged. Did you make them fire her? I don't hire or fire at Northbridge, I said. I handed them an index of flags. What they do with their staff is their decision. A door closed faintly on his side. A voice Lena's rose, then thinned when the door closed again. She thinks you did it to humiliate her. I did it to understand a partner, I said. And because she described me to her boss the way people describe furniture they intend to replace. He was quiet long enough that I could hear the refrigerator hum. We got married 3 days ago, he said. I don't know how to hold all of this at once. You don't have to tonight, I said. You only have to be honest, with yourself first. He exhaled through his nose the old way he used to when he was trying not to cry at 8. I'm sorry if she hurt you, he said. I'm sorry you're in pain, I said. Another beat. Do you have proof about the reports? Yes. Can I see it? Not this second, I said, but yes. On the line, a faint sound like someone setting a glass down carefully. Okay. We stayed there, the quiet working the kind of quiet that grows a spine. I'm going to hang up, he said finally. We need to talk. All right. I love you, he said, and he was my child again for half a breath. I love you, I said. The line clicked. I set the phone on the table and listened to it become an object. I poured water, then wine, then decided I preferred the water. The binder waited without impatience. I left it shut and called Caldwell instead. Evelyn, he said, voice clipped like someone who had been running and stopped just before answering. I was about to reach out. No need, I said. We'll proceed. I could hear his posture change. Meridian will engage Northbridge for the southeastern work. Scope as discussed. We'll send the RFP with finalized timelines tomorrow. He recovered quickly. Good executives do. We're grateful for the trust. We'll stand the team up immediately. There are expectations, I said. Obvious ones. Clear governance, clean documentation, vendor discipline, and staffing that matches the work rather than the politics of the room. Understood, he said. Regarding staffing, that's your decision, I said. I don't manage your org chart. Yes, he said, careful. Still, to avoid any appearance of... I don't require the appearance of anything, I said. I require the work. Staff to your standard. Hold to it. A pause opened and closed. Then we will. Send Cho the initial cadence, I said. Her notes are better than anyone's in your building. He laughed, surprised into it. They are, he said. Harper will own analytics. He's thorough. I noticed. I let a breath out I hadn't planned to hold. As for Ms. Rowan, my only comment is that she is at her best when she answers questions she actually knows. Caldwell did not step in the trap of agreement. We'll calibrate, he said. Good night, Mr. Caldwell. Good night, Evelyn. He hesitated. Thank you for not... Good night, I repeated and ended the call. I carried the glass to the sink and stood with my hands on either side of it. Outside rain began without bravado, freckles on the window, then a clean sheet. The city softened. The doorbell didn't ring. The key turned. Aaron called my name not loudly, not hiding that he had come. The hallway light caught his face first, the boy and the man in the same frame. He stepped into the kitchen, damp at the shoulders. I told her I needed air, he said. All right. He sat, then stood, then sat again. I read her posts, he said. It's all there, Mom. I just never... He stopped. I brought her here wanting you to like her. I didn't think about whether she respected you. I pulled a chair out and let that be the invitation it was. He took it. We went through pieces, not everything, not in one go, only enough to put shape to the fog. I slid across the smallest stack of printouts, not the binder, just 2 receipts and a calendar square. He didn't argue with paper. After a while, he leaned back and stared at the ceiling as if something had been written there and erased. I need to sleep, he said, exhausted down to the language. I'll go to the guest room. Of course. I stood with him. In the hall, he stopped and hugged me like he was anchoring himself to a dock. Thank you for not shouting, he said into my shoulder. I don't like shouting, I said. He nodded, let go, and went down the hall. I listened to the soft percussion of drawers, the slide of a zipper, the small domestic percussion of a person making a square of night to lie down in. Back in the kitchen, I turned off the lamp. The rain thickened. On the counter, the pearls lay in their shallow dish, quiet as punctuation. I set the glass beside them, closed the window against the weather, and let the dark room be dark. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.